Steel, vital for today's modern economy, and has allowed the rapid expansion in the size and strength of buildings and vehicles. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at steel. Steel has been produced in various forms over the last 4,000 years, and essentially steel is combining iron with carbon and various other elements in order to provide different properties. For example, if we were to add chromium to steel, then we end up with stainless steel. As far as the production of steel is concerned, steel is produced in very, very large quantities around the world, and essentially we need iron ore and energy. When we're talking about energy, we're really talking about coal for steel production, and so the markets of iron ore, coal and steel are very, very closely linked. The production of steel on a global basis takes about 2 million people are employed in this industry, and so it's a very, very important industry around the world. And it's a very interesting commodity because it's one of the few commodities which is virtually 100% recyclable. And so that means that when the object that has been constructed using steel reaches the end of its useful life, then we will look into selling it as scrap steel, which can then be reworked into new things. And this is particularly important for ships because we will make a calculation: how much money can we earn trading the vessel and carrying cargoes? How much money will we earn from selling it as scrap metal? Do we think that the prices of scrap metal in the future are going to go up or down? Do we think the freight rates in the future are going to go up and down? And then we can make our calculation of what is the best strategy. In terms of the production of steel, we've seen a massive, massive increase in production over the last 50 or 60 years, and we've got to about 1.6 billion tonnes of steel being produced on a global basis at the moment. And this increase has created quite a few knock-on effects, and we see these effects in China, in England, and different steel mills are having to close down because of these quantities. In terms of the countries which are producing steel, if we look back to about 2003, then we have quite an even split of the different countries which are involved in producing steel, and China, EU had a similar share. If we fast forward to 2013, where we have our 1.6 billion tonnes being produced, China is producing the majority of that. And so here they're producing about 780 million tonnes of steel on an annual basis. And as far as companies are concerned, the predominant company is ArcelorMittal, and they are making about 96 million tonnes of steel. In terms of the uses of steel, steel is used very, very much to reinforce buildings, to allow us to build buildings much, much larger, and also to make buildings which are earthquake resistant. Also, steel has been used to increase the size and strength of bridges, and so bridge design changed dramatically during the Industrial Revolution. Now, as far as trading is concerned, ships. Ships, before the advent of steel, yes, there was a short period where they were built with iron, but before that they were built with wood. And they were much, much smaller, much less strong, and now we see vessels going up to 500,000 tonnes of cargo, and we can't ignore that the container that we see everywhere, which is very important in trading, is built using steel itself. Now, in terms of the transportation of steel, we have a number of different forms of transportation. So first of all, if we are transporting very large quantities between quite large ports, then we will just charter a vessel and load the steel directly into the vessel itself. Otherwise, we could be loading smaller lots, and so we're loading into containers, and we can also combine shipments with other shippers as well, and so then we can benefit from a lower freight rate. In terms of the problems associated with steel, the main problem is rust. And so we see this on a regular basis, and different countries have different ideas of what is rusty and what is not rusty. For example, in Saudi Arabia, a tiny fleck of rust will be considered quite a lot, whereas in England, quite a moist, humid country, then a little bit of rust will be considered as not being very rusty at all. But we have to be very, very careful, and often we'll spend a lot of time trying to establish the origin of the water that made it go rusty. Was it salt water from the sea? Was it fresh water from rain? And so then we can determine whose fault it is and lay the blame. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Commodity Brief looking at steel, and we'll be back shortly with other episodes looking at different commodities. Please click back soon.